See, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 8:03 on LBC. Welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question. On the panel with me, to my left, Dame Penny Mordaunt, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Next to her, Daniel Johnson, editor of and columnist for the online news and comment site The Article. To my right, Preet Kaur Gill, Labour MP for Birmingham Edgbaston. And to her right, Tom Scottson, political reporter for the Politics Home website. They're here to answer your questions. You can call or WhatsApp on 0345 6060973. Or text 84850, and you can watch us on Global Player and the LBC app.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's kick off with Alex in Willesden. Alex, hi, what's your question, please?
Good evening, Ian. Yes, I've put a question to the panel. I'm a magistrate, and I was just wondering what the panel thinks about extending the powers of magistrates to hear more cases in the magistrates' court, freeing up time in the Crown Court. We already have summary-only cases enshrined in law. Why isn't it a case of extending those to allow the magistrates to hear more cases under that?
Preet.
Well, we are going to do that. We're going to give magistrates more powers so that they can issue more sentences. We have lifted the cap today, as announced by the Justice Secretary, meaning that courts can sit as many days as they want, for as long as they want. This is going to have to be quite a radical shake-up of doing lots of different things, because the system is got a huge backlog, 80,000 cases. This will increase to about 100,000. So it's not a case of having to do one thing. Of course, we've got to reduce the backlog. People want to have justice delivered. The fact that you can be a victim of crime now and, you could be waiting 3 to 4 years is not something that anybody would expect from our court system. So I really accept what Alex is saying as a magistrate. Give magistrates more powers. Let them, issue sentences. Because you've got to do a range of things. It isn't just about addressing the Crown Court and the wider court backlog.
But isn't it an admission of failure from David Lammy that he says, well, things aren't going to improve before the next election, which is probably 3.5 years away, and that even in 10 years' time, there will still be a clogging up of the system? Surely it's up to the Justice Secretary to come up with proposals that can clear this backlog a lot more quickly.
Well, look, he's inherited a system, within 18 months, you're not going to turn that round. What he has set out today is a range of different things that we need to do. We know that prisoners don't get to court on time. That causes a lot of delay. So how do we use bus lanes, for example, like already is done? So a range of measures, making sure that the courts can sit for longer. We can start addressing the backlog. I know that there's been, concerns raised about jury trials and the fact that, for the serious cases, they will still continue. But of course, we also know people know how to game the system. And so he has sort of set out a range of issues. You need a wider shake-up. This is a broken system over 14 years. No one is going to fix it in 18 months. I think it's over more like 40
years, but...
Yes, it's got its challenges, but I think he has set out some very sensible measures today.
Penny?
Well, look, I think there's lots of things that could help. The problem is we've got to bloody well get on with it. I have long campaigned for there to be changes which would reduce the number of cases having to go to family court, for example. We pioneered some schemes in Portsmouth where, rather than remove children from parents who both have a learning disability and are not bad people, they just are not good parents, you can devote sort of half the money you'd end up spending on the children, taking them into care, on providing them with a cleaner for 18 months and a tutor for the kids. Over a fairly short period of time, you can actually get those parents to be really good parents. And you cut adoption lists, fostering lists at the same time, as well as removing a lot of the caseload from the family court. And then just very practical things. I mean, I have recently been in court, not in the dock, you'll be pleased to hear.
Unlike me.
But, things like just hearing evidence, trying to hear evidence, video footage or recordings of statements being given, all that sort of stuff. Loads of technical problems that happen. And with AI now, we have lots of very low-cost options to make sure that if you've got everyone in court, they're going to be able to hear evidence. So there are lots of things. Lots of people have been shouting about them for a very long time. Let's blinking well get on with it.
Tom?
Well, to the delight of a lot of Labour MPs, that the government are putting a lot of money into this. The court backlog will go down as a result. But a lot of Labour MPs, and I don't think just on the left of the party, are particularly concerned about the lack of jury trials, for example. And I feel that they are worried that the jury trials are a great way as a good leveller, for example. So it doesn't matter what background you are and whether you're on the dock, you are going to get a much fairer trial than one individual judging you. And I think it just shows more of a weakness to perhaps maybe the government, that I don't think this rebellion would be here had Keir Starmer not fallen, particularly on the welfare rebellion. So I feel that it is a problem for the government. I feel that they are showing that the backbenchers, that they are putting more money into it. But the problem is that there are a lot of Labour MPs that are willing to rebel on this.
Are you, Preet?
No, I think, look, there is lots of conversations being had about the range of measures, and Penny mentioned AI, and that's absolutely right. I mean, transcribing, for example, takes a lot of time. You're having to wait and check records. Actually, that can be done very quickly. There are lots of things around access to videography in courts. We've got to put the money in. It hasn't had the level of investment that it's required. But the court, the jury trials are only one small element of it, because nobody is saying that we're getting rid of them. It's only for serious cases.
Daniel?
Well, Preet, you say it's only for serious cases. What is a serious case? If somebody's going to prison, that's pretty serious for them. I was once on a jury, and I have to say, I thought it was brilliant. It's one of the best experiences I've ever had. Many people listening will also have had the same experience. And I'm very worried about the idea of taking away people's right to elect for a jury trial. So I feel there has to be a better way to cut the backlog. We all agree, of course, that that's got to happen. But
the government have admitted that it's not going to cut the backlog. I mean, Sarah Sackman, the Solicitor, was she the Solicitor General or the Courts Minister? She said they'd have done this anyway.
Well, exactly. So clearly it's too little too late. It's not enough. And somebody said, we're putting in the money, but clearly that's not enough either. It's a mess. And I'm not surprised there's going to be a big rebellion on this. And wait till it gets to the Lords, even if it gets through the Commons, I think the Lords will not like it.
Penny, do you accept that under the Conservative government, effectively the court system did become a shambles, and it was because there weren't enough resources put into it?
I do accept that. It was on the Institute for Government's tracker as being one of the areas that was incredibly vulnerable for years and years and years. And to credit to actually a lot of people who found themselves in that ministerial office, most notably Alex Chalk, who tried to do a huge array of things to get things and prisons in a better place. And it just wasn't a priority for the Prime Ministers at the time and the Treasury. That is, I'm afraid, the facts of the matter. And I have to say, the scheme that I spoke about earlier, I went to see 4 Secretaries of State for Education to try and get it evaluated, because it made a huge difference and would have made a big difference to, as I say, family courts, and eventually managed to get a mechanism set up to fund it. And my local authority refused to be the monitoring officer for that grant. So
Why?
it's because it wasn't on their to-do list that year. Even so, it would have been a full cost recovery. So it's you run into blockages both nationally and locally. It is very frustrating, but we've got to keep pushing these things. And I don't have letters after my name now, but I'm continuing to.
Catherine says, like so many things in this country, trial by jury has become a luxury item. Just returning to that subject, Preet, I mean, David Lammy, when he was in opposition, was extolling the virtues of the jury system and said it would be outrageous to curtail it. And yet now he's in government, he's doing it. And I think ordinary members of the public, whether they are experts in the legal system or not, look at that and think, well, how can you go from one position to the diametrically opposite position?
Yeah, look, I think I'm equally of the view that, in a democracy, people having the opportunity to be part of that democratic process is really, really important. But, politics feels removed for most people because it becomes too centralised over 14 years of austerity. That's essentially what's happened. And so, the fact that people had this power and could be part of it, that's not going to disappear. Murder cases, rape cases will continue to have jury trials. I would say that, look, we've got an unprecedented situation that, as we are talking about decreasing the backlog, it's increasing at the moment, and it will continue to decrease until we actually have the measures in place to be able to put in the investment, to give the powers where it's needed, to start addressing the backlog. There are no easy solutions to fixing what is 14 years of the making.
Anyone want to come in on that? And there was silence, so they won't. We'll move on to another question in just a few moments' time. It's 8:15.
LBC. Question with Ian Dale. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
16 minutes past 8. Dame Penny Mordaunt is with us. Have you got used to being called a dame yet?
It's still very lovely. I don't think I'll ever not think it's lovely. But I've not been a dame for very long.
The not yet. I was going to say damed. I don't know what the word is. Bedamed? Is that a word?
I think this is all still evolving. We're way behind the sirs on
Anyway, Preet Kaur Gill is here, Labour MP for Birmingham Edgbaston. Daniel Johnson, editor of The Article. Tom Scottson, political reporter for Politics Home. Right, Robbie is in Chelmsford. Robbie, hello. What would you like to ask?
Good evening all. My question is, on the 4th anniversary of renewed war in Europe, what will it take to make the UK government properly fund our armed forces?
Well, Penny, you can speak on this for at least the rest of the programme.
Yes,
but
put your feet up,
confine yourself to a couple of minutes.
Well, look, great question, because I think this is now getting into a crisis.
We should explain you were Defence Secretary.
I was Secretary of State for Defence and Minister for the Armed Forces. I've been in the defence world for a very, very long time. I still work in the defence world. And We know that we've got this new NATO floor, so 3.5% GDP in pure defence terms, and an extra 1.5 on activities that support defence. But our own chiefs, our own defence chiefs, who are focused not on what everyone else needs, but what Britain needs, say we've got 4 years to radically modernise our armed forces, and that's not just the kinds of capabilities you see flying it around in Ukraine, drones and so forth. But it's how you can produce them and adapt them at speed. So the shelf life of a drone in Ukraine is about 6 months, and then it's obsolete because the enemy's figured out how to nobble it. So you need factories near front lines that can do that, maybe even buried underground. You need to be able to work with allies in a way that all of your data and information about that and the things that people need to operate and work together are securely shared. Massive architecture needed behind all of this. So you've got to do it now, and you've got to do it in step with your allies. Chiefs have given us 4 years. Guess when the Treasury unturns the taps and gets the money flowing? 5 years. So this is now a disaster.
Joined up government,
the Prime Minister has said he's eyeballed the President of the United States and the citizens of our country and said this needs to happen, but they're not. The Treasury isn't doing it yet, and I think they are in a completely different place to most people in Parliament and the public. If defence used to be about number 10 on YouGov's issue tracker, it's now in the top 3, and even Ed Davey has asked a recent PMQ on defence spending, which tells you it's got to be coming up on the doorstep somewhere. So, and I also think opinion polling, the majority of people across Europe, including the UK, think we're going to be in a serious conflict within a decade. So I think the government are completely out of step on this. And unless you spend on these capabilities, you can't have secure energy. You can't have secure data. Our NHS isn't going to be safe. It's foundational, and we're not doing it.
And I suppose we also have to recognise that the threat comes not just from Russia, but predominantly from Russia. Vladimir Putin I think he's in his early 70s. But he's not going to wait till he's in his early 80s if he wants to really threaten this country, is he?
Well, all the leaders who are significant geopolitical leaders are all quite elderly. And so they're thinking about their legacy as well as the day-to-day business of doing what they're doing. Part of what Putin is doing, there's some practical things behind it, access to the south, things like that. But it is also about his legacy and being what he considers to be a great leader in Russia. And we have got to have a credible deterrent. We have had. That's why he's not crossed that line with NATO members. But NATO says we've got to spend 3.5 on particular capabilities. Okay. We've got big gaps and we need to fill them.
Daniel Johnson.
Well, I agree with everything that Penny's just said, but I think there is more to be said. All our lifetimes, we've relied on NATO, but now NATO is looking very shaky indeed because of really the policies of one man, Donald Trump. And we cannot, I'm afraid, rely 100% on American support anymore. We also see the spectacle across the channel of Putin's close friend, Viktor Orban, sabotaging European efforts to help Ukraine. This is extremely worrying because without Ukraine, we would be incredibly exposed. Ukraine is now the most powerful military force in Europe, bar none, apart from perhaps the Russians. And we simply must support them much more strongly than we have been. So I think the situation is very urgent. I don't think we even have 4 years. I think we should be doing this much sooner than that. And I totally agree with what Penny was saying about not just the frontline forces, but also the industrial power to back them up. You know, Europe is still not producing nearly enough ammunition, hardware. We're not innovating fast enough. We're simply simply not keeping up. If you look back at the Second World War and compare the weapons with which we began that and the ones we finished with, there is simply no comparison. I mean, in 4 or 5 years, everything changes in wartime. And we've seen that with the Ukrainians, how they've innovated. But we've got to be able to do that too. And in fact, we have much greater resources. So there's no reason why we can't. The Americans are beginning to wake up. But the trouble is, we're not sure whose side they're on.
Tom Scottson, you are the youngest member of the panel. You are in your 20s. Does your generation look at these things and sort of in a very different way to maybe the rest of us?
I mean, I've definitely had more conversations with people my age now that are increasingly concerned that they will have to fight a war, potentially not necessarily the next decade, but in 2 decades. A lot of the Ukrainian fighters, we should not forget, are in their 40s or 50s, so that would generally time up. But I think the interesting thing with this is it's not just the war in Ukraine. Obviously, we've seen the war in Gaza, the threats from Iran, people becoming more hawkish on China. But I think the sticking point, and I don't think it's been brought up enough, is much of the public don't want to sacrifice what they pay in tax to spend on defence. There was some really good YouGov polling that showed that they didn't want to sacrifice NHS spending to spend more on kit, personnel. And I think this is the problem, that I've spoken to Labour MPs, and I think there are some incredibly sensible ones on this subject that are telling me we really need to scare the public in this, because we need to convince them soon enough that we need to spend more and not just get 2-3% of GDP on defence, but 5 and 6%.
Preet, I get the feeling from conversations I've had with Labour MPs that backbench Labour MPs such as yourself are a bit ahead of the government on this.
Well, look, I think the Russian invasion in Ukraine just shows it's not just about us and us increasing our defence spending. It's about NATO and building those allies, especially after Brexit, those relationships, how so much it's so important now going forward that we do come together. I think, the government has made it very clear that that's the reason we are supporting Ukraine with military, diplomatic and humanitarian aid. And actually we are. And let's not forget, we are putting £5 billion more into defence every year. So over the course of the Parliament, that will be about 270 billion. But let's not forget, we've got to have technology as well coming into this, because that's really changed how, weapons and other sort of protective systems operate. Have we invested in those kind of manufacturing, logistics, making things, or are we still reliant on a global world pool, which exactly what we were under the Conservatives? I think we've got some really good contracts under this government in terms of making it clear that, defence is really important. Yes, it's going to take some time to get to where we ideally need to be given the public finances. But I do accept that there are some real big challenges for us in terms of our own national security.
Let's just bring something else into this, because you will have all seen Boris Johnson over the weekend in an interview with Laura Kuenssberg. He was alongside the former, I don't know what his title was, Tony Radakin.
He was chief of
the General Staff.
Yeah.
And he suggested that Britain, to send a signal to Russia, should put boots on the ground in Ukraine in what he called safe areas. Now, Penny, I'd love to know what you make of that as a former defence secretary.
I think this has, all credit to Boris. He was someone that did recognise that Europe needed to support Ukraine, and one of the things I would say positively about him is he did do that. But I do think his suggestion smacks of, I've got to say something on this terrible anniversary, and this seems like a good idea. It's not going to help. And actually, even sort of boots on the ground after a negotiated peace isn't actually going to help much either. The only thing that is going to help is an effective deterrent. And we've got one already, which is NATO. So you've got to bolster NATO. The only European leader who is really saying that is Meloni, because she, I think the woman understands what credible deterrence looks like.
Well, perhaps she might like to spend more than 1.2% of her own GDP on defence.
Well, she is doing a bit more. And interestingly, she is also she's increased the aid budget on national security, across the piece, but it's going on things like national security. So I think she does understand this, but you can't have I'm afraid, a coalition of the willing. The EU battle group, which is exactly the same people that are in NATO, has never deployed because it can't. Because one nation requires a UN resolution, another nation requires an EU resolution, another nation requires all of the above, plus a vote in both houses of parliament, and you never get out the door. If you breach NATO rules, you know what's going to happen to you. And that's why it has seen us through some very difficult times. But only if we bolster it, and only if we have that kind of trigger, is Ukraine going to be safe from further Russian aggression.
Preet, what did you make of Boris Johnson's intervention?
Well, I think Keir's made it clear that, we won't be putting troops on the ground, and certainly not until there's a negotiated peace settlement. I mean, I think what we are doing is we are supporting with, various secure energy attacks that Russia has levied at Ukraine. We are putting in humanitarian support on for those on the front line. We are providing medical mentoring. We are doing so much more with the money that we are providing, and let's not forget, it's not just us. The British public don't just expect us to be playing our part. They expect all of our NATO allies to be doing their part, and they equally are, as is Poland and many other countries. So it's got to be a collective effort.
Well, I think Poland is playing more than its part. I think that they're spending something like 6% of their GDP, and clearly, and they have a reason why, given their geography. Tom?
Also, I'm just very intrigued as well that you talk about Labour spending more on defence, and of course it is from a low base, of course, but how much of that money is going into housing, for example, for veterans? How much of that money is therefore going to pensions? And I think it's very difficult. And what George Osborne did in 2010, 2011 is move the Trident into the defence budget. So it inflates it and looks like the government is spending more, when in actual fact, what people think...
Well, surely it should be part of the defence budget.
Well, sure, but I guess the people think about defence particularly, especially now in a conflict in Europe with more kit spending, more personnel. And at the moment, I think you can fill Wembley Stadium with our actual armed forces, which to a lot of people out there is surely not enough.
But housing will still be a fraction of the cost of the 270 billion over the course of the Parliament that we will actually spend on defence. And I think that's where procurement, it's about the contracts, it's about the jobs we create, it's about understanding that technology is moving much faster, and we've got to make sure that we've got the equipment that we need.
Well, yes, but I mean, our aircraft carriers can barely go to sea because they don't have enough escorts. We don't have. We're simply not. We're not doing what, for example, Neville Chamberlain did in the late 30s. I mean, I know his name is synonymous with appeasement, terrible prime minister, but he did actually spend a lot more money. And without that, we would not have been able to resist Hitler in 1940. And when we're in that same stage of a sort of pre-war build-up, because it isn't only Putin, it's also Xi Jinping and Taiwan. We haven't even talked about the Chinese threat, but that's a very, very serious threat too. So, we simply must do much more. The Germans, for example, are now doing a great deal more, and they have a real industrial might, which once it's mobilized will be formidable. But that will take a bit of time. But we, the British, have always been a bit nimbler, and we're very good at the high tech and the really brain box boffin stuff. We're still good at that. Why aren't we doing much more?
Final word to you, Penny.
Well, I want the government to match the rhetoric with money. And I can tell you, if they don't do it, the cost to not just HMT, but to our citizens is going to be extremely grave in a very short space of time. And in addition, we've got to look to our own civilian resilience as well. The kind of warfare we're going to see in the future will be very different to what we've known in the past. Our communications being taken out, our water supplies being attacked, all sorts of things. On the day the government announced its resilience strategy, it stood down the 750,000 COVID volunteers that stood up to help. I think there are people out there that can help, that want to be informed about what to do in certain circumstances, and would be really good and a help to the nation. We should do that.
Right, lots more subjects to cover. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:32. Let's get the latest news headlines on LBC with Matt Hewitt.
Lawyers for Lord Mandelson say he was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office last night over baseless fears he was a flight risk. They claim the former ambassador to the US had agreed to a voluntary interview next month, and his overriding priority is to support police and clear his name. President Putin says Ukraine is sabotaging peace plans on the 4th anniversary of the conflict, though Sir Keir Starmer says Moscow is to blame. The EU has confirmed a loan of €90 billion to Kyiv is being held up by Hungary. And Russell Brand is due to go on trial in June after pleading not guilty to 2 further sex offences, including a 3rd allegation of rape. The former comedian is facing several allegations made by 6 women, all of which he denies. LBC weather, showers for the north and west tonight, clear spells elsewhere with some mist, lows of 8 to 11 degrees.
This is LBC.
Whether you're
Question with Ian Dale on LBC.
8:35 on LBC. Dame Penny Mordaunt is with us. Preet Kaur Gill, Labour MP for Birmingham Edgbaston. Daniel Johnson, editor of The Article, and Tom Scottson, political reporter for Politics Home. Harry has sent in a text question from Cambridge. With New Zealand and Australia both keen to see Andrew taken out of the line of succession, is this saga weakening or strengthening the monarchy around the rest of the Commonwealth? Daniel.
Well, I very much hope it is strengthening the monarchy, because it seems to me the King has played this with an absolutely straight bat, really, really impressively. He's done all that you could possibly have expected from him, and the rest of the royal family have played their part too. I just think that, we ought to be reflecting on what the monarchy has actually done for this country and how very precious it is. Just because there is one, what should we call him, black sheep, doesn't in any way detract from the institution itself. This is something the rest of the world still, I think, envies us and admires us for, and we should not be throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Tom.
I think long term it could do. I think this is probably the biggest crisis the monarchy has faced since the death of Diana. And of course, the monarchy has gone through, tumultuous times and centuries gone by. I mean, it was abolished in the 17th century, of course, and it had the abdication crisis in the 20th century. But I just look at opinion polls, particularly for younger people, and it's a lot narrower, the support for the monarchy, compared to those that would like it abolished. And I just may be more concerned in a couple of generations' time whether there is more of a conversation, potentially a referendum, on abolishing the monarchy altogether.
I was just while you were talking, thinking, how old were you when Diana died in 1997? Or were you even born?
3 months old, 4 months old, I think.
Oh, God.
So, not to make everyone feel bad on the panel, but yes, I'd just been born.
But don't you think, about the younger generations, that's always been the case. The support for the monarchy among younger generations has always been narrower than older generations.
I think so, but I also look at, particularly through the war generations and those that came after it, there was definitely a more feeling of community and togetherness, perhaps. And I feel that we maybe live in a more atomised age, that we feel that we are less close to something like the monarchy, and everyone has their own cultural spheres now. And it's not something that I know of a lot of young people that turn on the telly on Christmas Day to watch the King's speech or the Queen's speech in years gone by. And I feel that tradition hasn't really held, whereas my grandparents' generation, my parents' generation would be more willing to do that.
Preet, are you being inundated with emails and letters about Prince Andrew?
I've had some. I think, look, a lot of people, this is quite an unprecedented situation to live in, although it's not new. The fact that we're seeing this played out globally and Britain's focus is on something that will be very deeply distressing to the royal family. It's been deeply distressing to see, I'm really proud of our sort of monarchy and really proud of what it symbolises. I think this has been really, really difficult to see. But what I will say is it also has shown the world how robust our institutions are. And, that gives me great comfort in that the law applies equally to everybody. And we have seen that narrative, from lots of countries in a way that actually they do respect Britain for that. And likewise I do.
Penny?
Well, as you know, Ian, I've just written a book about what a good idea the monarchy is, but also all of our traditions we have in this country. Pomp and circumstance, why British traditions matter. All proceeds are going to veterans charities. You can get it from all good bookshops. But it also shows that even younger generations are wanting to do more traditions. They're being revived in communities that have, in some cases, never had them before. And I think that is because they are a kind of superpower for this country. As Preet says, we live in a very volatile world, huge amount of uncertainty, rapid pace of change is bewildering. We need things that anchor us, that remind us where we've come from, that our uncodified rule book in this country has been stress tested over 1,000 years. We cut the king's head off, as was alluded to earlier on, and we decided that was a bit of a mistake. We've
if
been
they brought
through
that back, you could have swung your sword
We've been
again.
through a lot. Whereas actually in America, which is a much younger country, it has a written constitution, but it is going through the kinds of things that we have been through hundreds of years ago. Congress is just sort of finding its voice after the courts have ruled on tariffs, for example. We are incredibly fortunate to have something that is above politics, beyond politics, that at moments of great stress, whether it's the late Queen through COVID, whether it is the huge outpouring of good wishes that we had for the King following the Accession Council, that involved all of us, all the proclamations around the country. These things keep us steady. And I saw that firsthand going through all of that with the backdrop of the Truss administration. Honestly, if we get rid of these things, we won't know what we've lost.
Have you ever come across Prince Andrew?
I have met Prince Andrew on many occasions.
What did you think of him? Because Jackie Smith, my former podcast partner, who you know very well, she was an industry minister when he was a trade envoy, and she had to sit next to him at various dinners and said he was the most unpleasant, rude man she's ever come across.
Right. Well, he hasn't been rude to me, but I recognise that he, and I'm sure there'll be many stories, has been rude to other people. But in stark contrast to other members of the royal family who are, Princess Anne is just continually marvellous. The King's doing an amazing job. I know some charities recently that have gone to pick up an honour, and the detail that the members of the royal family presiding over that went into learning what those people did. I mean, they take their jobs extremely seriously, and I think the public do know that there is a stark contrast between people that know what their duty is and those that clearly have not.
Right. Here's a text question from Andrew. Not that one. It says, I don't think so anyway. Are AI videos on social media that shamelessly ridicule ministers and members of the royal family, including the King and the PM, harmless fun, or are they undermining our institutions? And if so, should there now be laws to protect a person's image and likeness from being abused by AI software that seek to demean or ridicule that person? Brief answers, please. Tom.
No, I don't think they should. I think this looks like an infringement on freedom of speech if we stop people ridiculing one another. I understand that sometimes they can be distasteful, and if someone was doing that to me on social media, of course, I would definitely probably, it could be quite upsetting, especially if it's someone for your family. But I feel that trying to ban people from making AI videos, it's their discretion.
Can you imagine, Penny, if these AI videos had really existed when you were swinging your sword? I mean, that would have been amazing.
Oh no, but so I speak with some authority. Honestly, the memes that day were marvellous. There was me with a kebab on the sword. But that is what is so marvellous about this. I mean, a lot of these traditions and rituals, they are a bit bonkers. They are a bit crazy. I mean, particularly the ones that go on at a local level, they are hilarious. But I think our sense of humour is the only thing we take really seriously in this country. And I loved it. I mean, there were lots of, there was lots of nice comments from Vogue and all those sorts of people about my lovely dress. And then there was this wonderful onslaught of pound shop, Princess Xena, warrior princess, all sorts of other crazy stuff, Star Wars lightsabers. I mean, it was marvellous. But I just loved it. It's what we're about, this country,
Your former colleague, Nick Dubois, he put one on Instagram the other day. It was his birthday. And somehow, I don't know whether he created this or someone had created all the former prime ministers round a table singing happy birthday to him. And you could hear their individual voices. It was amazing. Preet.
Look, I mean, I think I get it. Memes are really funny. Yes, they seem harmless. But I think when you get into what does demean mean or ridicule mean, that can mean lots of different things for lots of people. We saw it with the takedown of the Grok images because, I do worry actually about some of the images that I see, whether they're of, the Prime Minister or not. It's the sort of, I guess, the disinformation or what they're alluding to as well in some of them. Some of them are absolutely harmless fun and, you can sort of take it on the chin. But actually, I think sometimes we are going to have to think about, where do you draw the line as to what becomes demeaning? And actually, without consent of using my image to demean me, if it's a fun and joke, as all the prime ministers could think happy birthday to me.
But of course, what's a joke to one person is not a joke to the other. I mean, I wrote an article, defenestrating an article that Yasmin Alibhai-Brown had written about Margaret Thatcher, and I created an AI image of Yasmin, who's a friend of mine, as Margaret Thatcher. Let's put it this way: she didn't see the funny side.
Okay, yes, but I suppose that's still humorous, isn't it? I mean,
I thought so.
Yes, I know. I think what we are seeing a lot, though, I think the worry for me is
taken it as a massive compliment personally, but there we go. Daniel, sorry.
No.
Well, I hate sort of restrictive laws, but I think it should be possible to sue. If one of these images is really damaging, you can show that it's been damaging, then you should be able to sue.
But I mean, this Crewkerne Gazette, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's basically a guy in his bedroom in Swindon, I think, and he creates these amazing AI videos which show like a PMQs. He's depicting Kemi Badenoch as a rapper,
brilliant,
and Keir Starmer as a Dalek.
Yeah, that's great.
And Kemi climbs over the dispatch box and whacks him with a fish. I don't quite see why that's funny, but anyway, I mean, they are brilliant. But you could argue, Daniel, that there's one video they've done of Keir Starmer and Peter Mandelson as something like out of Brokeback Mountain. Well, I mean, Keir Starmer might take offence at that.
Yeah, he might.
It's very
On the
funny,
whole,
though.
it's not a good idea for prime ministers to sue, though.
No, that is very true. Right, lots more questions to come. It's 8:46.
This is LBC.
Octopus
Question with Ian Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:49. Dave from Solihull informs me that the fish from the Crewkern Gazette sketch was taken from Monty Python. See, that's why I don't find it funny, because I never find Monty Python funny, but maybe that's just me. Penny Mordaunt is here, Preet Kaur Gill, Daniel Johnson and Tom Scottson. Nick in Slough says, regarding the BAFTA Awards incident, do you think John Davidson, who has a disability, should apologise for his disability? Now, we're going to be talking about this in our 9 o'clock phone-ins. I'm really interested to hear what your views are on this. Preet, let's start with you.
No, I don't think that we should allow this issue to become a kind of a culture war where, disability and anti-racism are somehow in competition. I think, you can stand against racism, you can, support someone with a disability. I think there is an issue about, the BBC, what they knew at what time when they undertook some of the editing, and therefore should they have had the opportunity to remove or edit.
Well, they did
out.
For 2 hours.
Clearly that is an issue. I mean, they are independent, but I think the questions have got to be asked as to why didn't they think to remove that?
Tom?
Given that would be a deeply offensive term.
But, the thing here is that there are some of your colleagues, Dawn Butler is one, who said, well, this is outrageous that this word should have been used. Doesn't matter if he had Tourette's. I'm thinking, no, you don't understand what Tourette's actually is.
I feel incredibly sympathetic to him. I think that, as we said with Tourette's, it's an involuntary tic. What would be on his mind, he was going to say it, and what he desperately didn't want to. And I think out of embarrassment, he left early from the BAFTAs. I think this is what we've also got to remember. So I just have incredible sympathy for him. Again, it was a night for celebration for a brilliant film that was raising awareness of something that people don't really understand. And I think clearly from the conversation, a lot of people, but also a lot of MPs don't really understand it too.
And we should remember that apparently he got an award from the Queen, obviously before she died. And while she was giving him the award, he said, F the Queen. And she had been warned that he might well say something because that is the disability. Well, he wouldn't have wanted to do that.
No, absolutely not. No, I think... Dare I say it, they should have given him a break, all these celebrities who've decided to take offence. No, I think, poor man, this was his big night as well, and this is, after all, what the film is all about.
Yeah.
I don't wish to diminish, the offence that perhaps it caused to some people, but honestly, context does matter of this.
Penny?
Well, I think the only people who are at fault is the Beeb for not bleeping it out. And because they've been here before. We had the Glastonbury incident where they had a shorter period of time, but when offensive remarks were made there, they didn't. They chose not to edit that out. There was a big hoo-ha, and they re-examined their policies, and they've kind of done it again. And I just think they dropped the ball on this.
Because the two presenters, they didn't seem there was a sort of slight look of panic on their faces, but they just carried on. I was doing a podcast earlier with somebody who suggested that what they should have done is then uttered any offensive word that they could think to sort of make the guy feel better, which I think the people would have had a field day of bleeping out the other things then. Maybe.
So they were prepared. They had the imagination to think what might happen in this situation. Well, why didn't the programme editors? It was bound to happen because those things are likely to happen more frequently when people are stressed that have that condition. I just think they dropped the ball, and that's why there's a big hoo-ha about it.
You also talk to any broadcaster as well. I'd say that the BBC are probably the best funded for producers. So it's not like they had very few staff on hand that could have sorted this out quite quickly.
Could never happen here.
Different calibre.
Different calibre, absolutely. Yeah. Right, let's go to Ulf in Hamburg. Hello, Ulf.
Good evening, guten Abend. Is getting a trade deal with, or negotiating about a trade deal with Donald Trump worth the trouble in view of the past 2 weeks shenanigans? It's utter chaos. Can anybody tell me whether you got a better trade deal than the EU or the other way around, or is everybody equally badly off and the EU has suspended the thing? It's so confusing and unpredictable, you might not bother to make the effort.
Daniel.
Well, unfortunately, we have got to make the effort because the United States is a very important trading partner. But yes, it is completely mad. And I noticed that Wall Street and so on have started to take less and less notice of these tantrums because quite often what the president says doesn't then actually happen. So I'm sympathetic to our German questioner there. Yeah, we feel the same way on this side of the channel.
Penny, you had quite a lot of experience negotiating with individual states in America. Is there any lessons that you could impart to how we should deal with Donald Trump?
Yes, I mean, Donald Trump is using the tools of trade policy, not for trade policy. He's using them for, as punishment beatings for countries, all sorts of things. So I think we just need to understand what's going on with regard to how he's approaching things like tariffs. But yes, we did state-level deals in lieu of a federal deal when the Biden administration wouldn't play ball with us on that. And actually, that's where most of the regulation sits. You can do mutual recognition of qualifications. Because of some of the deals we did with the US, it's easier for an accountant in Edinburgh or London or wherever to do work in the US than it is for an accountant in the state next door. So there's good stuff to be had there. And the point of being able to pursue trade deals with the US or be part of CPTPP and other trade blocs like that is that you are moving to a way of approaching your regulation which is based on adequacy and equivalence as opposed to it having to be identical. And that opens up immense opportunities for the country. We're taking some of them up. We've got more that we could take up and do. But it also has the power to really improve world trade and lift enormous numbers of people out of poverty. So I was a Brexiteer. I still believe in it. I wish we were doing more on it. And I wish also that we could remove some friction that still remains with the EU. Understandably, they're trying to protect their membership, but there's no practical reason why that needs to remain.
Preet.
Yes, it's really important. It's in our national interest. It's our closest ally and partner. It will directly affect jobs, our economy, if we don't try and negotiate. Of course, there's been some back and forth on lots of issues. I'm from the West Midlands, where JLR were impacted, of course, with the tariffs. Negotiating, on behalf of them, on behalf of all those people that work, not just at JLR, but the wider supply chain, really matters. And that's why the Prime Minister has spent a lot of his time rebuilding Britain's relationship back on the world stage, making the trips to the United States. Yes, of course, it's been quite an unpredictable relationship and it will continue to be. But then at least you know where you stand. And therefore, you have got to continue to negotiate in our best interests. And that's what the government's doing.
Tom?
I think long term, yes, it's very important because there will be life after Trump. He might become a lame duck president in a couple of months' time after the midterms. And I think it would be a good signal, particularly to the next US president, whether a Republican or Democrat, that during these erratic times, we are standing by the United States and showing that we are an incredible ally. The only thing I would say, though, is that, of course, Keir Starmer has shown that he is, a friend of Trump and has almost sort of thrown everything at him to try and charm him. But it's not really worked in the end. It looked like it had, but it seems to have fallen down the same path as his and Theresa May's relationship, particularly towards the latter end of her premiership.
Right, let's go to our fun question. Ulf, thank you very much, by the way. It's from Jacob in Southampton. Bear with this one. A lonely monkey called Punch, which lives in a zoo in Japan, has gone viral after he was rejected by his mother and then ostracised by the other monkeys in the enclosure, but was then shown closely attached to a cuddly orangutan toy instead. If Punch can't live without that cuddly toy, which object can you simply not cope without? Preet.
My handbag.
It's a very Margaret Thatcher thing to say, if I may say so. Tom?
My headphones, I think. My £30 headphones, because if I'm feeling bad in the morning, a morning coffee won't pick me up, but if I can just play some good cheap
£30 headphones?
Yeah, just put them in. None of the Apple...
You need a pay rise.
I do, yeah.
Daniel?
Lose them.
Well, since Punch was ostracised apparently by his mum, I lost my mum just over a year ago, and one of my most precious objects is a poster of her looking incredibly glamorous as a Labour candidate back in 1975. And every time I see that, it cheers me up.
Penny.
Oh, that's lovely. I don't think there is an object that I couldn't live without.
Sword,
however, one of my cats has a toy owl that she carries everywhere with her. And so I think if, the house was on fire and the cats were secure, that's what I would have to go back for.
Yeah, my schnauzer has a cock pheasant that he takes everywhere. Insert your own joke here. Thank you all very much indeed for coming on the programme tonight. Now, on tomorrow's panel, we have the business lobbyist Ros Morgan, MPs Callum Anderson from Labour and Tom Morrison from the Lib Dems, plus the independent Baroness Kate Hoey. Or is she that independent? We might find out tomorrow. Right, coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to the issue which the panel discussed a few minutes ago, the row about Tourette's campaigner John Davidson and his use of the N-word during Sunday's BAFTAs ceremony. Today, a black British filmmaker called John Tay Richardson has resigned as a BAFTA judge because he says that the organisation has repeatedly failed to safeguard the dignity of its black guests, members and the black creative community. He says that staying part of BAFTA, while it doesn't acknowledge the harm inflicted on both black and disabled people, would be tantamount to condoning its behaviour. But what could BAFTA really have done on the night? Kick John Davidson out? What he said is a result of his disability, so would that really have been fair?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse and their families are preparing to attend Donald Trump's State of the Union address. Amanda Roberts is the sister-in-law of Virginia Giuffre, who was trafficked by Epstein and died by suicide.
Today is monumental. Today we say to this administration and to the nation that survivors deserve to be seen. We will not be moved, we will not be silenced, and we will not go away.
More than a dozen survivors and families have been invited by Democrats to tonight's set-piece speech. You can hear it in full tonight on LBC. Lawyers for Lord Mandelson claim he was arrested due to the baseless suggestion he was preparing to flee the country. They claim the former ambassador to the US had agreed to a voluntary interview with police next month. Peter Mandelson was questioned last night over claims he passed sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein while he was business secretary. His lawyers say his priority is to clear his name. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been described as rude, arrogant,